Sorry, we're running a little late. I've been looking for Miss Fox and I haven't seen her. So. Please rise for the invocation of Reverend Heather Davis, Associate Pastor, First Presbyterian Church.
Let us pray. God of minute details and broad dreams, we come to you this night thankful for leaders who step into positions of power and decision-making. We come to you this night praying for your guidance in our details and in our dreams. Be ever present in our decisions for others. Keep your spirit in all hearts and minds as this body guides the direction of this community. Give them strength and poise. Give them insight and patience. And most of all, give them wisdom and love that seeks peace, justice, and prosperity for all who live and call this great place home. In one voice, let all God's people say together, Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have some special guests, and I'm going to introduce a representative of Viewmont Animal Hospital. Is that right?
Oh, I think you can hand it over to Chief Adkins.
Oh, Chief Adkins. I'm sorry.
I get overlooked all the time. Under the radar.
That's it. That's it. Mayor, members of council, Mr. Barry, Mr. Crone, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here in front of you tonight to go over and to familiarize yourselves with a very unique unit within the police department, a very loved unit within the police department by all of our citizens. Only not so much all of our citizens, but some drug dealers out there that may not like these particular units. And also a unit that their partners are so close that you cannot believe. Tonight I'm talking about our canine unit. Our canine unit has been around since 1993. We currently have 4 canines within our ranks. Their Master Police Officer Mike Rollins with his partner Vulcan, Master Police Officer Williams with his canine partner Bashak, Master Police Officer Scott Pendleton with his canine partner Rico, and Master Police Officer Marcus Chapman with his canine partner Gino. This, as I said, started back in 1993 with a vision of Chief Lucas. Chief Lucas did a lot of research on this program, but also during that research he knew that he had to find a community partner that would care for these animals during their shifts, during their times that they needed to have the regular checkups, just like we all do. And hopefully we've had over the period of time some scrapes and bumps and bruises, so the canines had to go to the Viewmont Animal Hospital to have that taken care of. So now I'm going to ask Chief Lucas to come out to give us a little overview of how his vision came to light, and then we'll ask Dr. Pope to come up and some of his folks and talk about what the initiative they started, and we'll bring out one of our canine officers to speak about the canines that they have with us tonight. Chief?
Thank you, Chief. You covered everything that I wanted to cover.
That's it.
Just like at home, I get no respect. It was interesting, though, back a couple of years prior to 1993, when we were doing the research on canine units. We looked at 2 of the best canine units in the country. One's the United States Secret Service, and the other was then the U.S. Customs Service. And we looked at their particular programs and how their dogs were acquired and how their dogs were trained. And then in 1993, Thanks to drug dealers and money that we had gained through forfeiture, no expense to the taxpayers, we were able to implement our canine program. It started out over a year or so getting a couple of dogs. At that time, the now retired Dr. Jim Peoples and his colleague, Dr. Gary Pope, said they would be very interested in helping us in the health care of these dogs. Some of you have been on council long enough to remember when Dr. Peoples and Dr. Pope came here and became the official volunteer veterinarians for the police canine unit. So for these 20 years, the staff at Viewmont Animal Clinic has provided routine veterinarian service for our animals at no cost to the city of Hickory. So combined with the fact that we were able to use drug dealers' monies to fund the unit, to acquire the dogs and the extensive training the officers have to have, we've had this loyal group of veterinarians, and I was tickled to death when I went to the 50th anniversary of a Viewmont Animal Clinic. This year they celebrated their 50th anniversary. And I met a young lady that you'll meet momentarily. She had become so involved with our police dogs. She has pictures of them mounted in the clinic, and she started a special project. And at this time, if it meets with your agenda, I'd like to introduce Dr. Pope and let him introduce you to his people and tell you about this particular project.
Okay. Let me pass around one of the vests. You might be curious to see what one looks like. Thanks for having us here tonight. Give you a little background. Several months ago, Rico came to the hospital to be checked over for injuries after apprehending a bad guy with a knife. And it was found he didn't have any injuries, but we also found at that time that the canine officers didn't have any protective gear to use in these type of very dangerous situations. So Kelly took it upon herself. Kelly and some others here all did introduce, along with Dr. Lisa Deacon-Smith and Lauren Billhorn, all take care of the canine officers. Thought it would be a great idea to try to get some ballistic vests for the canine officers, so she started a fundraising project, and we ran it through the Viewmont Animal Hospital. It's quite ambitious. The vests are about $950 a piece, so we didn't know how many we could raise money for, but through the generous donations of lots of individuals, several of our veterinary suppliers, and some matching funds from Viewmont Animal Hospital, we were able to purchase 3 vests at this time, and we're still raising funds for the 4th dog, and hope to have that within the next few months. So we really like helping the dogs. Think they do a great job for the city, and we wanted to present the vest tonight. And we also have some goodie bags for them that have heartworm preventative, flea control, and some goodies for the dogs. Just they were donated by some of our veterinary suppliers. And Kelly, did you want to do your presentation too?
So in getting all this stuff, I also came across something I thought was kind of neat. In gratitude for all the work that Sergeant Medley has done canine units. I just made him a little something, a shadow box that's got the canine unit locker in it. And it's got all 4 of the dog pictures in there, so we're going to give it to him so he could either put it at home or in his office, wherever he likes.
Very much.
Sergeant Bailey, you gonna make a speech?
As Kelly said, Sergeant Jeff Medley was one of our first canine handlers in our program, and over the years we've had 10 handlers and 10 canines, and they've taken over $1 million of street value of drugs off the street, but also hundreds of thousands of dollars to help pay for the continuing program, all the necessities they need to continue working our streets of Hickory. We have Officer Chapman with us tonight with Gino, and Officer Pendleton is going to give us a little bit of background, a few minutes of what the program is, how it runs, and we'll talk about Gino.
Like Chief said, my name is Officer Scott Pendleton. I work Canine Rico. I actually do have Rico with me tonight, but with both dogs being male, both dogs being pretty stubborn, they decided they didn't want to come in the room at the same time together. I'll do the talking, and we'll talk about Gino and all the dogs. We do have 4 dogs. We have 3 Belgian Malinois, which Gino is a Belgian Malinois. Rico, my partner, is a Dutch Shepherd. Me and Officer Chapman's had these dogs 3.5 years now. So we're kind of one of the newest new members of the canine unit. We both went to Texas back in 2010, early 2010, spent 6 weeks at Canine Global Training Academy, just south of San Antonio, Texas, in a little town called Somerset, Texas. There, we got introduced to the dogs day one. He said, "Here's your dog. Good luck." It was a very intense program. We started at 6:30 in the morning and ran to 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening some days. First week was all book work, learning how the dogs work, scientific principle behind them. And the next 5 weeks we were in the field with them every day. Training, narcotics training, tracking training, and patrol. So our dogs are trained in narcotic detection, patrol work, and tracking. All of our dogs are trained to locate methamphetamine, heroin, ecstasy, marijuana, and cocaine. And they're all good at what they do. And we're constantly locating narcotics in vehicles, houses, helping out the narcotics unit. Second, what they do is our patrol work, which is their building searches. If someone breaks into a building, we can use the dogs to go in to search the buildings, which is makes it safer for the officers. The dogs know where the suspect is way ahead before we do. They also are trained in handler protection. If we were to get in an altercation with a suspect and didn't have any backup there to help us, the dogs are trained automatically to help apprehend the suspect without commands if they see their handler being assaulted. Our dogs do live at home with us. They're part of our families. You know, the city bought the dogs, but they're our dogs. We bathe them, feed them, get them to the wonderful people at Viewmont Animal Hospital for them to take care of them. Normal working life with the dog is anywhere from 6 to 8 years. Like I said, we've had these dogs 3 years, so I expect another good way my dog acts, probably another 10 years out of him, because he still acts like he's a puppy. Once the dogs do retire, we do have the option to take the dogs home and keep them as a pet at that point. And I don't see many handlers spending 6 to 8 years with the same dog day in and day out, not take him home and make him a pet instead of a police work dog. Anything else? Go ahead.
train, and once they're trained, they're good to go for
It's
their whole career, or?
it's a constant training. You know, it's one of those things where you get one thing absolutely perfect, and you know, and something else needs work. So you know, it's a constant training that we have to train. You know, 'cause we actually train 2 days a month as a unit, and then we train every day as partners. It's constant training. Oh yeah.
Any other questions for the handlers?
Is it
Chief?
true that you speak another language to them?
Everything's all Dutch commands.
The drug addicts don't know.
They think sick when we stay.
Chief, thanks for the vision 20 years ago for our canine program. Folks at Viewmont Animal Hospital, thank you for the constant care of these animals. Kelly, thank you for your dedication to create the best for these high-risk situations for our officers and our canine in high-risk situations. We appreciate the continued partnership with your hospital. Thank you. Thank you.
We have so many wonderful situations where individuals and businesses in Hickory are doing things for their fellow man, and in this case, fellow critters, and we don't know about it. I would never have thought about this one, would you? But we appreciate it very much. Viewmont Animal Hospital is great. Dave? Your turn.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I'm very sorry I haven't yet animals or body armor. I'll try to be brief. I'm Dave Pace. I'm here representing the Hickory's Business Development Committee. We're a team of community volunteers who advise the city on business-related opportunities. Our mission is to identify ideas which have the potential to grow our economy and make recommendations to our elected officials and to the city staff. In the frequent rush to find new business opportunities, we can forget about those enterprises who sustain us. So, as an extension of Life Well Crafted, Hickory established the Business Well Crafted Award to recognize and thank those businesses and their employees who have influenced this community for generations and continue to do so today. This award honors a business that has been operating in Hickory for at least 75 years. The Carolina Theater has provided entertainment for generations of Hickory residents for almost 80 years. Although it has always been a small business with relatively few employees, the Carolina Theater has affected many thousands of lives through the power of the movies showing on a screen. It was here that women first fell for Cary Grant or Laurence Olivier, and men for Marilyn Monroe or Elizabeth Taylor. Here we were enthralled by Bogey and Bacall and thrilled by Bonnie and Clyde. Teenagers on their first date, weary parents taking a break from their children, spent happy hours transported to another place by the magic on the screen. Over the past several decades, the multi-theater Cineplex has taken over the movie business, and many of the small theaters, which were a mainstay of many downtowns across the country, have disappeared. In the face of this competitive pressure, the Carolina Theater has successfully adapted their business. First, by changing into a second-run theater, offering family-friendly, low-ticket prices and amenities. More recently, by upgrading their facilities, including installing a modern digital projection system. For people who haven't been there, it's a very comfortable theater. It's a really nice experience. By changing with the times, the Carolina Theater has remained profitable and hopes to continue and offer enjoyment to the entire community for generations to come. There's no material award which could properly represent the value that you, the Carolina Theater, and your employees bring to our community. It's impossible to ever repay what your company has given us. All we can do is say thank you for the gift. As a token of our esteem, we do have a rather handsome plaque to give you, and accepting this award is Billy Reed, co-owner of Carolina Theater. Thank you.
everywhere involved in business association. Most people cannot think of, I guess, anybody from about 50 on the Carolina Theater without thinking about Lacey Stars. We've sold tickets there in the box office for approximately 64 years. And the day she stopped, she just basically said, "You know, I need to stop." Same day, she was still exactly right in the middle. That's a tribute that everyone. Of course, I've been involved for about 30 years now, and as an employee and the owner, co-owner. And we do think that making our theater basically as best we can, but making it a hometown theater, somewhere that people can come and enjoy and afford to come to the movies and stuff. And we go through employees, but we also keep employees. Keep many times employees for over 10 years. Because it is a starting job for young people to start and learn what they need to do in life's decisions and etc. And until they can advance to another job. I know that just sitting here thinking, there's 2 police officers actually on the force that basically work there at Carolina. One was Keith Yoder, and the other gentleman was Mr. Medlin, who just left. He worked there before he started on the force. So a lot of people have worked there and gone through. A lot of people, like I say, took their first date there and ended up marrying and things. But we, just because our philosophy changed, like I say, hard to compete with the big boys when they got the money and you don't. But that don't still mean you can't do things to strive to make your place as best as you can and update it and make it as nice as you can, but make it affordable for people that they can go to the entertainment and they can, get a ticket, they can get a drink and popcorn and not have to, mortgage their house. Can't say anything bad against the first runs. It's just that the way they're structured and everything. We, like I said, had different. We've had great last since '98 when we bought it from Mr. Kenneth Benville. We've tried to improve things, starting with air conditioning, etc., and up through the years and stuff. And of course, like I said, the last thing was the digital equipment. Basically, the movie business basically put it in a situation you can either go out of business or buy digital equipment because we're equipped making film, which is a lot of people, to them, it's disheartening because film was their life and they would love to see film on the screen. Digital is great, but it is a financial challenge, but we've been able to do that. And like I say, we're going to continue to do what we can to improve and we've decided to put our strides in what we make basically through different projects into the building, into improving it for the public, but still keep it as affordable as possible. So I do thank everyone for this nice award, and we're glad to put it up where people can see it come through. And of course, without you, everyone is coming to the theater, we wouldn't be there. And so we look at it on as much on the public side of what it's going to cost them to come in and what they've got to do as we do on our side. And with that kind of philosophy, that sure does take care of the house on the lake that you don't get to buy. But also, an employee that's here for me for about 10 years or whatever is Amy Moore. She's here today, back here, and she went to Lenore Ryan after Hickory High and stuff. So, like I say, they like it because it was a good first job. It's our employees are our family. That's the way it is. We don't have a big boss and they tell everybody what to do. We all work together. Again, I'd like to thank you and appreciate this so much.
Mr. Teague, I'd just like to say thank you. You know, a lot of people may not know that he's worked with our Community Relations Council, used the theater and fundraisers, was a key club advisor at Hickory High for many years, and I know we used it at least 3 or 4 times to raise money for Children's Miracle Network. Not many businesses will open up and share profits like that. We appreciate all you do.
He had a business in Viewmont.
Yeah.
Too, wife and children.
Yeah. My father ran Windy City Jewelers for about 50 years or whatever. Worked for him for 37 years besides part-time at the theater for all those years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have the persons requesting to be heard, the representatives of Friends of Hickory. First, Allison Holtzman. And we remind the speakers that we ask that we try to work within a framework of 3 minutes, and we do call time, but then we'll talk about it today and negotiate it.
Okay, well then briefly, I'm Allison Holtzman, and my husband Adrian and I moved to Hickory about 6.5 years ago. Both grew up in Atlanta. We chose Hickory because of the field dips. It was something smaller, but we felt like it had everything we needed without the headaches of a big city, and we liked the area. So basically, I'm here tonight to introduce to all of you Friends of Hickory. We put this together because once we were living here, we loved where we were, but we'd find ourselves in conversation with friends or other people saying, wouldn't it be great if we did this? And we'd say yes, and then we'd go, wouldn't it be great if we saw this? And we found that we didn't really have a place for us to discuss as citizens ideas that we had and to bring them to fruition or communicate to other people, these are our ideas and let's get together and talk about them. So we formed a group called Friends of Hickory. We're a group of citizens in Hickory, North Carolina who are interested in investing in the welfare and prosperity of the community in the city of Hickory. We see that Hickory briefly has been handed down many assets that were already here. The arts community, the salt block, the parks, the university, the college, a historic downtown, and a creative and talented workforce, among many other things. And we have the inherent assets given to us. The lake, our location, our weather, where we are in the interstates, close to the mountains, close to the international airport, and we have our own airport as well. We do face challenges, the times for Hickory and for the nation where we've been in recession, and so there have been challenges in moving forward and getting things done, and we do recognize these, and we feel that one way to move forward even now is to basically bring together a group of people and create an excitement in Hickory and highlight the assets that we do have here. Friends of Hickory is excited about Hickory, and we want this passion to become contagious. We plan to do this by talking, but also by doing. We would like to begin by taking one project at a time and rallying the community to take part. We want to bring ideas and people together. These projects include, but are not limited to, parks and recreation, greenways, bike lanes, streetscape improvements, artwork, business development, etc. We desire to benefit all the city of Hickory through these projects. We hope that by accomplishing city improvement projects, the people of Hickory will be encouraged to have more of an active role in what happens in Hickory. We hope that new city projects, along with a restored sense of pride, can encourage current residents and businesses to stay in Hickory and attract new residents and businesses to come. We hope to see a vibrant economy in Hickory, which will employ our residents. This will obviously benefit all of us, as we will have a bigger and more prosperous tax base, which will allow us to put money into our roads, our schools, our parks, and our people. So basically, we're just here today to introduce ourselves, because we want you to see Friends of Hickory as an asset from the start. And that's really what it is. And Hank's going to go on with a few more details.
Just a few more. Hello, my name is Hank Eimer, and like Allison, I'm here at the Friends of Hickory. This fall, 15 like-minded individuals got together and discussed exactly what Allison just outlined. We all agreed that we were passionate and committed to helping Hickory continue to move towards becoming a place where we can enjoy new and existing spaces. Hopefully that would encourage others throughout the city to do the same. Like all great ideas, this is a grand one, we know. We realize that although the enthusiasm is here, we need more than 15 people to understand and support what we're trying to accomplish. How are we going to do this? Our first step is a friend raiser. It's just a way for the Friends of Hickory to introduce themselves to the vision, to get in front of others that are committed to the same great town as ours. This is going to be January 9th. Hopefully we can turn those 15 people into 200. We have associated ourselves with Partners for Parks out of Charlotte, which is a nonprofit group which has the mission, their mission is to improve the quality of life for citizens within the region, and it sounded pretty good for us. We came here tonight to introduce ourselves and establish a relationship with this council. With Hickory's continued discussion on future projects, it shows their commitment to young families, business owners, existing citizens, and new arrivals. Everyone in this room is fighting for the prosperity of this town, and we're excited to become a part of it. We all want to thank you for your commitment, your service, and your time.
Well, it's January the 9th. Are there any age requirements or limitations?
Everyone's welcome.
Everyone, okay.
Do you have a time I was putting in the
Time?
place?
7 p.m. at Holler Mill.
Sir, you can spread that around if you don't mind. I was going to write it down, but I'll forget the paper. Well, I think that's fantastic, and it ties in so well with our Inspiring Spaces. And we want to have lots of input from the three of you and your colleagues and friends. We want all generations to be represented, and I think, what do you think, Brad, one generation removed from us? Well, you think you're a generation removed.
I am,
but we do, honestly, we would really value your input as we try to decide the best way to use scarce resources and motivate our people to invest in this critical need we have to use the wonderful assets we have. You nailed it. I mean, we've got all these things going for us, and somewhere we've lost track. I don't know what it is, but why in the world would a group of people in this metropolitan area rate us 185th in livability out of 189? We've lost something. We've lost touch or something. We need your help. We desperately want to turn this around. And I know you're in the real estate business, right? You want to turn it around. I'm in the sign business. I want to turn it around. Bruce does appraisals. Brad sells hotel rooms. Danny here is retired. Hank drives a school bus. He still needs help. Zagaroli's retired. But hey, he's got kids and grandkids he wants to help take care of. And Ms. Patton, we know about her and her family, okay?
And a comment I'd like to add too, Mayor, it speaks to our last meeting when we were talking about how sometimes it takes a set of eyes that isn't in here to see all the great things Hickory has to offer. Ms. Holtzman and her husband coming from Atlanta, choosing to move to Hickory because of the wonderful amenities that we have. So that's very much appreciated. And tell your story loud and proud, because we need that message out there.
I think that's the same message that we saw at the college the other week. The girls came from California, Hank met them, and they had a great story to tell. Chose Hickory because of everything we have to offer.
I think this just goes through. We're just right on the edge of great here. I can see it, and it's so. From this perspective, from sitting back here, it's so great to hear from people that I've never met, and to hear them come up here and tell that kind of story, and how great the city is, and how excited they are about everything that's going on, and to do it on their own initiative, it just makes it even that much better. So we're looking forward to hearing from you in the future.
I think we are on the edge. We're going to have to take some risks. We're going to all get a little bit out of what we call our comfort zones. Because, you know, we've always kind of said, well, we've always had a little bit, I'm speaking for myself here, okay? I've always had a little bit of a hunker down mentality. If it gets bad enough, you know, it gets tough, your budgets, you're not meeting your budget, you hunker down. You find a way to hunker down. Well, we got to start, no hunkering down. We're out there, we're going to take some chances, we're going to invest, and we're going to ask people to get a little uncomfortable for a while. Thank you, that was just so timely and wonderful. I'm glad I set that up. My goodness, who set that up?
Wrong Hank, different Hank.
Different Hank. Yeah. Seriously, thank you all very much. We appreciate it. Motion to approve the minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Seaver, second by Patton. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. It's unanimous. All members are present. Any motion to reaffirm and ratify on second reading? Motion by Mr. Guest, second by Ms. Patton. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous. Anything to be moved off the consent agenda?
Move approval of consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Meisner, second by Mr. Lael. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous. Public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item of new business is consideration of a rezoning and public hearing that goes with that. Before I call on our city's planning director, Mr. Frazier, to present the item to City Council, I wanted to kind of put it in context and give some background, and then ask Mr. Crone if he would talk in the specifics in terms of your options tonight with this item and moving forward. So what is before you this evening is a rezoning of approximately 10 acres, 10.1 acres of property that is owned by the city of Hickory. And so to go back in time a little bit, the city has had approximately 79 acres at the intersection of Highway 127 and Cloninger Mill Road. Early on, it was identified by the city that the 10 acres that sit at the intersection of those two roads was probably best suited for a type of commercial development, and identifying and utilizing the remaining 69 acres, which actually goes down and touches the lake and has a number of interesting amenities to it, actually identifying that area as a park. And to remind you, in 2008, culminating in 2009, a master plan was actually done, put together to plan for park development on those 69 acres. So looking at the 10 acres, for a number of years, there wasn't any significant commercial interest in that intersection, primarily, I think, due to the overall malaise in the economy. Several months ago, city staff began to receive some interest expressed by various developers, and consequently began to explore exactly the means for promoting commercial development at that intersection, at the same time balancing the need to have that property work well with the park that will be developed, recognizing that that's a significant gateway into the city. Had a lot of interest in how that gets developed. But also trying to balance those interests of the city, so to speak, in the community with the needs that we were hearing from the development community in terms of what they would need to be able to successfully develop that property as a commercial, a viable commercial site. So looking at how can the city council maximize its influence on the ultimate project, we've kind of gone down two paths, if you will, two tracks. And they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, and the first track is the rezoning that is before you this evening. So staff has gone through the Land Development Code, has recommended a zoning that has significant a significant overlay, if you will, and Mr. Frazier will go through that in greater detail here in a minute. But it's important to recognize that that you as the city council obviously have the legislative authority as it relates to zoning throughout the city. So in effect, that's the hat that you're wearing tonight to rezone property. The second interesting situation is that you also own this property. So you kind of have two opportunities here in terms of influencing the type of development. You have zoning, your legislative authority, but you also have the ownership authority, which of course can be much more detailed than just the legislative authority of zoning. So tonight is the rezoning, and I'll come back to that in a second. Of course, Mr. Frazier can talk in greater detail. But the second path for you having influence on how that development takes place is under the fact that the city owns the property. How you go about exercising your influence from the standpoint of an owner is not quite as clear-cut as zoning. I mean, zoning is a very well-defined and codified process that you go through. How you choose to divest yourselves of the property, if that's what you choose, or how you choose to partner with the private sector for development is a little more of a gray area. Statutes are in place that govern how you go about doing that, and staff has spent a good deal of time looking at the economic development statutes and conversing with the School of Government to see how you could go into some type of process, again, that would maximize your influence. The sale, and of course, council can speak in more detail to that if needed to, but the sale of public property is governed by statute as well. So traditionally, you would entertain offers on the property, and then you would have to go through an upset bid process. And that process itself somewhat limits how much influence you can have on the end development. Ultimately, you never have to sell the property if you choose not to for whatever reason, if you don't like the price or if you don't like the project that is proposed to go out there. So the second path of your ownership opportunity, we've been exploring a statute 158.7.1, which is titled Local Development. We're not ready tonight to present that in detail to you. But again, tonight is your rezoning. You could look at that as a minimum standard. Any development going forward as a minimum would have to meet the requirements of that conditional zoning that Mr. Frazier can present if you choose to do that tonight. Our expectation as staff is to come back to you in the future as we've been able to get better clarity on the local development statute and present to you what we think are options that would let you even have a higher level of influence on the end development. Higher meaning if zoning is here, you would go to another level of how much influence you would have on that development. Again, that's available to you because you own the property and potentially could enter into an agreement with the developer that has more specificity than the zoning. So in some ways, we might be able to sync these two up so that they complement each other. But recognizing that this zoning is kind of coming out first out of the chute, you haven't seen any kinds of economic development or development agreements from staff, so you don't know exactly how that would look. We don't know exactly yet how that would look. I'd ask Attorney Crone to spend a few minutes and lay out for you what your options are in terms of the public hearing tonight and considering the zoning tonight so that you can have that clear in your mind as Mr. Frazier presents the zoning to you, and then we'll be glad, of course, to answer questions and facilitate discussion on that.
I don't think that there's any secret as to how important that piece of property is to the mayor and council and to our residents. I think you've made that very clear in the past and both your meetings and in our workshops that we've had. This particular piece of property, staff has started to see some interest from various individuals or entities that are interested in that piece of property. And I think what staff is trying to do is first rezone the property to a conditional use designation to kind of focus on what can go in there and what can't go in there. I think that was the goal of staff, was to narrow down and and come to you with a plan that would not turn people away, but would put various restrictions, is not the right term, but have a good fit for what goes in there. And you can do that tonight. If you want to consider the zoning, you can move to continue this hearing until indefinitely before you open the public hearing. You can open the public hearing and continue it, hear from the public and continue it to a time certain, or continue it indefinitely, in which time it would have to be renoticed, or act on it tonight. The two paths that Mr. Berry's talking about with regard to this particular piece of property, or any particular piece of property that the city owns, is whether you want to sell it pursuant to the negotiated sale statute and consider a contract, or whether you want to look at this piece of property as an economic development potential and basically say, we've got this piece of property, are you interested in doing something different, or telling us what your view would be for this particular piece of property, and let us work together on an economic development agreement. Under the statute, and this is where it gets kind of dicey, if you go the negotiated sale, well, we've got a contract, let's look at it. There are certain things in the law that apply that don't apply to the other statute, to the economic development statute, and those are as follows. First of all, those contracts, or a contract, will come to you. There can be no discussion in closed session about the disposition of property by contract. So that's not something you can talk about in closed session. That's why we're having this conversation right now about the process. You cannot, if you sell property through this process, through negotiated sale and through the upset bid process, you cannot, and it's a very strange case that I think was incorrectly decided, but you cannot put restrictions in the deed. So if you can't put restrictions in the deed, then you've got to zone the property through conditional zoning in order to be comfortable that you know that whoever buys that property has to abide by the terms and conditions of the conditional zoning. There are a number of developers who may be extremely good fits for that particular piece of property, but they don't want to make a commitment until they come in there and kick the tires. They may have an anchor tenant in mind, and they may want to get it under contract and have some ways out, and that's not unusual. If you ultimately go the upset bid process, you own the property, and when you go through the process, if you don't like whoever the final offer is, or if you don't like the final offer, you can reject it and start all over again, basically. So the key points I want to make about the negotiated sale upset bid process is that any discussion about that must occur in open session, number one. Number two, you cannot put restrictions in a deed. Number three, it must go through the upset bid process. And number four, you don't have to accept a final contract. Thus, if you want to restrict the use of the property, and I use that with a small r, you've got to do that through conditional zoning. And staff has been working on that. I've had some input in those discussions. Another potential is the local development statute allows you to negotiate with an individual that is interested in coming together with you to sign an economic development agreement. And it's a little, the focus is a little different than just putting it up for bid and selling it. The focus is, okay, we've got this piece of property, it's really nice. We want to stimulate the economy and use this economic development statute to do that, but we also want to see a really nice project there. So who are you? What do you have to offer? Let's work together. And if you do it through the economic development statute, and y'all have done this before, you've negotiated these, but this is a little bit different. This is not a situation where you're offering incentives through tax abatement's not the right word either, through tax situation. The consideration for this, and it's specifically carved out in the statute that has been challenged in the courts, is as long as the developer is paying fair market value or above for the property, then you can negotiate and enter into an economic development agreement. You've still got to have jobs. Those need to be identified. There still needs to be clawbacks to the extent that you can, but what are you going to claw back if somebody puts a nice development in there and hires people? I don't know if there's any clawbacks as you would in a tax trade-off. But you can put restrictions in the agreement. You can sit down and know who the person is, eyeball to eyeball. You can talk about the project. You can talk about the number of jobs. You can talk about what's going in there, how it's going to look. And as long as you dot the I's and cross the T's, then you can take that route and use the economic development statute or the local development statute. You can discuss economic development relationships with others in closed session. You cannot discuss selling a piece of property by virtue of the upset bid process in closed session. I have had a feeling for the past 20 years that you all want everything to be open and everything out on the table, and that's why I think having this on the agenda is a good opportunity in open session to just give you a thumbnail sketch of what the law is and the conversation that I've had with staff as they have diligently gone through the process of trying to figure out the best use of this property for the city and for the citizens, and to get the most value out of the property. Value meaning not only financially, but from an aesthetic standpoint and a neighbor standpoint. So I hate to be so long-winded, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
I have a couple questions and comments. To the point on the closed session about discussing economic development agreements in closed session, the purpose of that is not to restrict what citizens might hear on it, although that's an effect of it, but it's to be fair to all the parties that are at the table negotiating.
That's an excellent point, and let me pursue that a little further. When I talk about talking about that in closed session, that has to do with if somebody would identify themselves but not want to that become public knowledge during the negotiation process, it makes pretty good sense not to disclose who the party is until you reach an agreement or find out what, you don't want to scare them away. And any contract that we do, any contract that we do for economic development is going to be presented in open session and be vetted by everybody at this table and public hearing. So when I say discuss in closed session, I'm talking about you can discuss who it is and some of those details that
you may not know who it is if they make an offer in the upset bid process. But when I'm talking about closed session, I'm not talking about doing anything behind doors other than identifying and talking with an entity or an individual about that potential. But any economic development agreement or contract or discussion of same would be done in open session and subject to a public hearing. There are times when public hearings are required on those and times when they're not. I've never seen this council not call for a public hearing when it had to do with an economic development project. Never seen it in 20 years.
Okay, and I have a couple other questions. I really like what you said, Mr. Berry, about the unusual position of council having to be steward of the city's property and act in that capacity, at the same time acting in the capacity of a governing board that's dealing with zoning issues which are established, at least the framework of which is established by state statute. So I know from experience on council that once you start that zoning training up and you begin that process, subject to rezoning, it is left that the train is left the station. Is it possible, with what Mr. Crone's presented, that because I am very interested in being a steward first for this property, and then being a policymaker second as it relates to zoning. So, is it possible at this time that we could explore that option of being a steward on the property before the zoning train leaves the station, so to speak? I know we've advertised for public hearing, but you mentioned some options.
Your option is to move to continue the public hearing before the public hearing is open, and you can do that indefinitely and ask staff to bring it back to you at a later time. You can open the public hearing and have the hearing and rule on it. You can open the public hearing and hear from people and move to continue it to a time certain or indefinitely, or you can open it and without hearing from anybody, move to continue it to either a time certain or indefinitely. If you're considering those options, it's up to y'all. You may want to consider the first option unless council wants to hear the presentation of the rezoning.
How much do you have to add? Which one of those options involve re-advertisement?
All of the options would necessitate a new public hearing notice unless you open the hearing and decide to continue it to a time certain.
Even if that, I personally would like to see it advertised. We're not talking that much money in comparison to the public interest.
I'm just telling you, in the past, ever since you've been around, that's been our marching orders, or that's what we felt like we needed to do anyway.
So, hearing a presentation on the matter does not, we don't have to open the public hearing to hear a presentation. So I would,
I think it'd be appropriate to hear a presentation, and then you don't have to open the public hearing.
Yeah, right, we wouldn't. Yeah, we could have a comment after that.
Yeah, I think it'd be productive both from a staff standpoint and from your standpoint to hear, the zoning, hear what the thoughts are. I was presented to the Planning Commission a few weeks ago, give feedback to staff, get some reaction, give you all a chance to kind of ponder on it, because whether you were to choose to rezone it kind of initially versus wait, you're gonna end up potentially rezoning it either way. I mean, the stewardship analogy is a really good one. If we're able to come up with an agreement under the local development statute or the economic development statute. Either way, you're still going to most likely rezone that property. So it'd be good for you to already be thinking about the conditional zoning that Mr. Frazier would present to you and give him some feedback on that so that in the future, if that were to come back to you, it's familiar to you. There may be tweaks or adjustments to it, but at least you kind of got a benchmark, a baseline that you're working from.
Let me just ask, what is the expected range of value of that 10 acres?
300,000? 800, I'm sorry, 800,000. So it's significant.
And what do we expect that park to generate, to make a nice park down there? What do we expect that to come from?
Well, it's the plan called for it to be done in phases, but I'm thinking 1.2 million back, 3 million. Now I'm low tonight on everything. Must be budget season.
Well, that is gorgeous property. It could be a passive park tomorrow. With a long-term plan to make it more than a passive park. I've walked it myself. It is a fun place to be. I want people to kind of understand what the issue is. The issue is, you can build a good case that that piece of property, it'd be nice to not use it, just hold it as a city. But it is so valuable, and the cost to do anything with the property behind it is so high that we think if we could accomplish all of our objectives, if we could get 800,000 out of it and have it developed and landscaped and camouflaged the way we would like to see that done.
I want to tell my fellow council members who may not know, Brad, since you and I are in this business, what the procedure is of what, I'm trying to think of two entities that are no longer in business. Let's say Winn-Dixie and A&P. It's not Winn-Dixie and A&P that are negotiating for this property. It's a developer. And this developer comes in and he'll put down some money and then he'll go out to A&P, Winn-Dixie, several others, just like Lowe's and Viewmont. The dealings weren't with NDI and Lowe's. They were a developer. So it's not an entity that we're dealing with here. It's a developer. Right?
Who might have a very, it'd be hard to predict what level of assurance he has as to who he most likely would put in there. He may know exactly who it's going to be, and he may have no idea.
Right. Is that any type of sense of urgency?
Well, the sense of urgency is that we do have interest. So I think it's incumbent upon us to be responsible in our response to the developers who are interested. And that's part of why we kept going down this path of the rezoning, was so that we can continue to get greater and greater clarity on what the expectations of council are in terms of the project as it goes out there. Certainly there's going to be some that would like to try to tie that property up tomorrow and go out and try to find a project on it. I think our sense as staff is we're much more interested in you all getting the type of project you want out there than meeting the timeline of the developer. And I'm sure there's going to be a couple of them that will be a little frustrated with this, but anytime you deal with government, the wheels turn slowly. That's just the nature of the beast.
This is our house right there.
Are any of the developers local?
I don't know all the connections that they have, but yeah. I just asked that we pull up the map just so that everybody's familiar with what we're talking about. So there you've got the intersection of Cloninger Mill, which goes down the screen, if you will, next to the blue where the wastewater treatment plant sits, and then that's Highway 127. It kind of makes the L. And the property we're talking about is the red hatched area, and the green is the rest of the property owned by City Council that's planned park. And that's Lake Hickory is the white area that comes in there and looks like a lake.
How many acres of the green?
It's 79 total. 10 acres is the hatched-in area, roughly 10.1. So you got 69 remaining that is planned for the park. CZ? Yeah, CZ is a relatively new zoning construct, and again, Mr. Frazier. Mr. Frazier, why don't you come on up? We're having too much fun here with the planning director. I always hate to start talking like I'm a planner because Brian's back there grinding his teeth. Why does he do this to me? So let's let Mr. Frazier talk about the CZ and answer whatever questions y'all may have relative to that.
Mayor Wright, members of council, Mr. Barry, Mr. Crone, good evening, and an early Merry Christmas to you. I think mostly Mr. Barry and Mr. Crone took a lot of wind out of my sails here, so I'll be brief. But I enjoyed the conversation, and I do have a dentist appointment tomorrow. We'll just go back a bit. Okay. Again, this is rezoning petition 1315. Again, we're at the intersection of Cloninger Mill Road and Highway 127, and we're looking at rezoning from NC to NCCZ. We got 10.1 acres of property. Again, the NC is the neighborhood center commercial district, and CZ is for the conditional zone. And there is water and sewer service availability to the property. And Mr. Wood was kind enough to remind me that the current asking price on the parcel is $850,000, just for your benefit and information. The CZ zoning, as Mr. Barry correctly indicated, is something new. This is really the first case for it since you all approved Hickory by Choice 2030 and the majorly updated land development code. Maybe just about 3 years now, in a couple of months. It's gone by that quickly. The conditional zoning district basically, as Mr. Barry, Mr. Crone said, will place additional standards on the district that go above and beyond the standards contained in the base NC district. And all those standards applicable, including the architectural design standards that are in the base zoning district, the NC, will of course remain in effect. And again, as Mr. Barry indicated, this is the current neighborhood mixed-use area for future land use. We've got our residential areas here, both low and medium density. You can see the lower density down here. The blue is basically public institutional with the city of Hickory property with the northeast wastewater treatment plant, which is now, of course, has seen a major upgrade in the recent year. Here's Cloninger Mill Road, 127 North Center Street, and this is the code that comes down from the lake and the river, and this is the park, and this is the 10.1 acres that we're talking about. The reason you see the green here, it's not a slight variation and overlay, it's just the fact that this would be the right of way for a future Cloninger Mill Road northeast expansion in the coming years. But again, this hash mark is the property that we are talking about. The proposed conditional zoning district would limit the individual building size for commercial buildings to 60,000 square feet. So you're not talking about a huge and big boxes. The mixed-use buildings may be greater in size if the upper floors contain only residential uses, which could be a possibility, and the bottom floors not exceed that 60,000 square foot max. As Mr. Barry said, the property is owned by the city, and the rezoning basically for the CZ is sought to ensure greater certainty for you all, for the developer, for the future business owners, and for the neighbors regarding the type and character of development that will take place on the site. In years past, before Hickory by Choice, when it was adopted maybe back about 3 years ago, we had a lot of conflict about commercial creep and what was in the interest of economic development in the local business community and what was interested in the neighbors. We think this is a perfect or fairly perfect match as to the interest of both, because all parties know exactly what they're going to get. There's not going to be a lot of uncertainty here at all. I also wanted to let you know that the Hickory by Choice 2030 Comprehensive Plan classifies this area again as the neighborhood mixed use and the park in that pinkish purple color and the green and the
in the red hash. And the Cloniger Mill Park Master Plan sets aside this area for future commercial development. And the subject property is, of course, fully consistent with Hickory by choice and the Cloniger Mill Park Master Plan document. So we've talked about, future land use a little bit. This is the aerial ortho for petition 13-15. Again, 127 North Cloniger Mill Road. You've got some residential here, 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 up in here. This is the parcel in question. This would be the park, Fallen Creek, into the cove, which runs into the lake. Of course, just to orient you. The rezoning itself, as you can see, this is a property that we are directly talking about tonight that would become NC, CZ, conditional zoning district. We've already touched on this a little bit, both Mr. Crone, Mr. Barry, and myself, but the conditional zoning places additional restrictions on the property that has to be agreed to by the city and, of course, the buyer and developer of the property, but on the property that are above and beyond the base zoning district. And the NC base zoning district is about the highest district that we've got now in terms of development of architectural design and development standards. And again, the CZ zoning is used to create more certainty about the character of the development above and beyond the base zoning district where everyone knows what they're getting in advance. There's little room for doubt or uncertainty. For the rezoning petition 1315, we put in, as part of the CZ, a number of prohibited uses. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but automotive sales, service, vehicle repair, other type uses. But it would allow, retailers such as a Napa, O'Reilly Auto Parts, etc., to be there. Fuel sales, a gas station would only be permitted as an accessory or ancillary use, like you see at some grocery stores and larger stores in the area. They would be accessory uses like a full-service grocery store, like you see at Lowe's in Viewmont and Lowe's Sandy Ridge and 29th Avenue Northeast. Pornographic materials, other types of unseemly businesses would also be prohibited, except when certain apparel is an incidental product, such as a clothing store or general retailer of the ones named, or other similar retailers where such sales are expressly permitted. Pawn shops, secondhand retailers, secondhand precious metal dealers would be prohibited from this area, as would animal kennels. Open outside storage, commercial storage, except through an approved seasonal and temporary sales permit, would also be prohibited in the CZ district. Discount general food retailers would also be prohibited. We would permit discount retailers of clothing, assorted sundries, household goods, such as the ones named there. And that list, of course, is not in any way exclusive for that. Yes?
Now, the developer would take the risk, for example, that Steinmark doesn't renew their lease, and he would have to find a retailer that does meet these standards.
Yes, sir.
To replace it.
Yes, sir. That's absolutely correct.
If it goes through a bankruptcy, these things still follow the property.
They have to, because it is zoning. It is actual rezoning.
This is not an exhaustive list of uses permitted or excluded, because underlying the conditional use is the neighborhood center. So, by way of example, a tattoo parlor, is that permitted in the neighborhood center as personal service?
That one I do not believe that it is. I mean, I would honestly have to double check that.
Okay. I mean, I'm just trying to think.
With me, but no, this list is not exclusive or exhaustive. There's a number in our table of uses. There's a number that would require either a special use permit to go before the Planning Commission for an advertised public hearing, or they would just not be permitted at all. Some of the building and site design standards, basically above and beyond those architectural and design standards within the code in the base zoning district. Again, as I mentioned before, for commercial use, no building can be over 60,000 square feet in size. We already talked about the residential aspect as a possibility. No more than 50% of the building exterior walls should consist of EIFS or stucco type materials. We require 30% of the building to have glazing, glass, and 50% of the required glazing has to be transparent and allow views into the interior of the building, both for aesthetics and for safety reasons. We require now, basically in all our districts, we emphasize putting clear glass at the entrances so emergency services such as fire and police can easily see them inside. The facade and roof colors have to be low reflectance, subtle, neutral, or earth tone colors. All colors would have to be approved by myself as the planning director. The use of the high-intensity colors, metallic, black, or fluorescent, would be prohibited. The building trim and accent areas may feature brighter colors, including primary colors. Neon tubing would not be an acceptable feature of the building trim or the accent area. Other building and design standards above and beyond the base zoning, strictly for the CZ, that the pedestrian level lighting has to be included along all walkways for safety and aesthetics within the development, and the lighting can't exceed 12 feet in height, so you're not going to have monster light poles that you see along the interstate. Tree survey would have to be conducted by a licensed arborist. Any tree greater than 30 inches in diameter must either be protected or mitigated through replanting in another location. In the code now, concrete planter boxes, these of at least 4 foot in diameter and 3 feet in height would be required at the front elevations of all the proposed buildings on site at no more than 50 feet on center. Development would have to connect with the adjacent Cloninger Mill Park property in at least 2 places. Further connectivity. We would require 1 outdoor dining area, and bicycle parking would be required just to facilitate that connectivity and recreational and connected retail shopping use. I would conclude for rezoning petition 1315 that the staff finds the rezoning consistent with the Hickory by Joyce Comprehensive Plan 2030 and would recommend that council approve the requested zoning. And just furthermore, back at the December 4th meeting of the Hickory Regional Planning Commission, they voted unanimously, I think by an 8-0 vote, to recommend approval to City Council for the CZ zoning as well. That concludes my brief presentation this evening, and I'd be more than happy to attempt to answer any questions that council may have this evening.
I have a question as it relates to the CZ, since we've not seen that zoning use before. I have had experience with PD zoning. PD zoning, zoned PD, and then there is the developer establishes to staff and to the planning commission sitting as a quasi-judicial board, we're meeting these standards. Staff has the leeway to make some minor amendments to the PD process without coming back before council to be rezoned with PD, correct? Mm-hmm. Does this allow those minor amendments, or would this require a whole new rezoning? In other words, the prescriptive requirements in there relating to the site lighting or the outdoor dining, if
they would have to adhere to those.
They have so that means it has to have. Staff could not find that that was a minor amendment. To
no, I mean, this is more restrictive than plan development.
Plan development.
In many cases, plan development. It's a great planning term. I learned in college like 30 years ago, loosey-goosey. It allows a certain it's much broader in its category of what's permitted in the PD than the CZ zoning was. There's much more, sometimes there's been a lessening of what I would consider a nice color scheme. There has been at times a loosening of standards for landscaping, the lessening of the standards of parking. So this is much more restrictive. I mean, there's been complaints over the years. Well, I thought I was going to get this in the PD, but I really didn't. It doesn't focus in as much. On the uses, and the PD is much broader. So this is much more well defined for council, the prospective developer, the business owners that would locate there, and of course the surrounding neighbors.
I think when we went through this whole process, that was part of it, was that protection of the neighborhoods.
That was a huge part of this, Councilwoman Patton. Yes, that was addressing some of the neighborhood concerns, not necessarily about Commercial Creek, but okay, we've got a rezoning. They said they were going to do A, and they ended up doing X, Y, and Z. We know it's still legal, but we think we sort of got hoodwinked a bit. So this just fosters better relations. Everybody knows what they have to do in advance.
So if council were to choose to adopt this zoning, either tonight or in the future, and then we were able to put together some type of an economic or land development agreement, as Attorney Crone and I have talked about, what would be the process to come back and then amend the conditional zoning, so to speak, add additional criteria, tweak criteria, etc.?
You'll have to go back to council.
Okay, so it comes back to this body, they hold a public hearing and they amend it. So if there were issues with the lighting or something else that, as we got into serious negotiations with the developer, needed to be tweaked either to be more restrictive or less restrictive, it would come back to them, same process.
It goes back to planning, doesn't it? It goes back to the planning commission.
They would have to make a recommendation.
Yeah, so it just goes, that's what
Follows
I want to have clarification on, it just goes right back through that same rezoning process.
Full-on rezoning.
It's a rezoning. Okay. Just want to make sure everybody understood that's the process, how it works.
What does staff think would work best in this situation?
Well, and I'm going to speak for myself, and Mr. Frazier, you can opine as well. I think our thinking all along has been this establishes a baseline. It's clear to us. It's a defined process that we have, not necessarily the CZ, but zoning in general is a defined process we have used successfully for years to define what's going to go out there. I'm personally comfortable with this being put in place with the eye toward trying to get better clarity. And again, I really like the way that Mr. Lell quantified or identified it as, from a stewardship standpoint, as an owner, if you're able to enter into an economic development agreement, this is your baseline. No economic development agreement can go below it. An economic development agreement can certainly go above it and have many, many more restrictions on what goes into this property. So I'm not sure I can articulate what the disadvantage would be to set this out there as your baseline. There could certainly be them.
Wouldn't it set a baseline for the development?
It does. It basically says to the development community, you won't do anything less than this.
Let me ask Mr. Frazier, is a CZ zoning southeast region-wise? I mean, there are a lot of...
It's not just in North Carolina. I mean, it's all over the country. More and more folks are using it. I mean, it's not contractual zoning, which is a